Hi, it's Pastor Brian from the H.U.B at My Commission, and we're moving on to week 4 of our series, Words That Jesus Would Say. What if the loudest voice in your life isn't actually the voice of Jesus? Over the past few weeks in the series, we've been rediscovering what the voice of Jesus actually sounds like. And it's not shame, it's not condemnation, it's not constant pressure telling you're failing, but his voice, the voice of Jesus. Week 1, we talked about Jesus' voice saying, hey, don't give up, I'm still with you. And week 2, we talked about, hey, there's more in you than you see in yourself. And in week 3, we talked about you are held even now. And now maybe for some of you, those truths started changing something inside of you. Maybe you stopped feeling all alone and abandoned, and maybe you started believing that your story isn't over. Maybe you finally took a breath after caring too much for way too long. But you know what happens next? Even when God is with you and you know that, fear still has a way of showing up. And fear has a voice that is not always loud or obvious. Sometimes it sounds practical, reasonable, careful even. It sounds like, what if this doesn't work? Or what if I fail? Or what if I trust again and get hurt? What if I trust and things fall apart? Or what if I'm just not enough? And if we're not careful, fear doesn't just visit. Fear starts leading our lives. We start making decisions based on it. We start pulling back or shrinking our lives around fear. And the dangerous thing about fear is this: it doesn't have to be loud to be in control. Some of us have lived with fear for so long we don't even recognize it anymore. We use kind words. We call it things like being careful, protecting ourselves, staying comfortable, or avoiding disappointment. But what if actually what you've been calling this wisdom has actually been fear? Because fear doesn't just affect emotions, fear affects direction. Fear will keep you from stepping forward. It will keep you from trusting God fully. It will keep you from healing or forgiving. It will keep you from becoming who God desires you to be. But I want you to hear this today. Fear may be present, but fear does not get the final word. Because over and over again in Scripture, when people were afraid, Jesus speaks. And he doesn't speak about shame or rejection or condemnation, but he speaks about peace, courage, and his presence. In Matthew 14, the disciples are in the boat in the middle of the storm. It's dark, the wind is strong, the waves are crashing, and they are terrified. And then Jesus comes walking on the water. They don't even recognize him. They actually think he's a ghost, and honestly, that's what fear does. Fear distorts what we see. Have you ever walked into a dark room and saw something in the corner and immediately your brain starts creating a whole story? That maybe it was something that was threatening, or maybe it was your heart jumped and raced for a few seconds, and then the light came on, and it was just a coat hanging over the chair. It's the same room, the same object, just a different perspective. Fear has a way of filling in the blanks with the worst case scenarios. Some of us right now aren't just dealing with fear, we're making decisions based on what fear is showing us. Fear says you'll fail. Fear says people will leave. Fear says things will collapse. Fear says don't trust, don't step forward, just stay where you are. And before long, you're not living by faith, you're living by fear management. But right in the middle of that storm, Jesus is speaking, saying, take courage, it is I, do not be afraid. Now notice this, Jesus doesn't shame all of the disciples for being afraid. He reminds them about who's standing in front of them. And maybe that's what some of us need to do today. Because fear is talking so loud that we have forgotten who Jesus is. We've forgotten that he's still present. We've forgotten that he's still faithful. We've forgotten that he is still bigger than anything you're facing today. Psalms 56:3 tells us, when I am afraid, I put my trust in you. Not if I'm afraid, but when I'm afraid. Fear may show up, but let trust and truth get the final word. And that leads us to something powerful. Because fear loses its power when we recognize Jesus' voice. Jesus says in John 14, "My peace I give you, but not as the world gives." That means the peace Jesus gives is different than a temporary comfort. Because the world says, "I will have peace when everything changes." And Jesus says, hey, you can have peace before the situation changes. Because peace is not the absence of chaos. Peace is the presence of Jesus in the midst of the chaos. With the disciples, the storm didn't instantly stop. The wind was still there. The waves were still moving. But something shifted when they recognized it was Jesus. And maybe you know what that feels like. Have you ever been overwhelmed, anxious, uncertain, and then someone you trust walks into the room? Nothing really changed immediately, but suddenly you could breathe again. Why? Because there was a presence that changed your perception. That's what Jesus does when you recognize his voice. Fear may still exist, but it loses its authority when you recognize Jesus' presence. Isaiah 26:3 says, "You will keep in perfect peace those whose minds are stayed on him." Not those whose lives are perfect, but those whose focus is fixed on Jesus. And maybe that's part of the struggle for some of us. We've been staring at the storm so long, we've stopped looking for Jesus in it. Fear gets louder when we give it all our attention, but faith grows when we start listening to Jesus' voice again. And here's where it gets real. You cannot follow Jesus and fear at the same time. 2 Timothy says God has given us a spirit of fear, but of power, love, and a sound mind. Fear is not from God, which means if fear is leading your decisions, Jesus is not. And a lot of us believe in God, but we still let fear determine our direction. Fear decides whether we're going to trust. Fear decides whether we forgive or whether we obey. Fear decides if we move forward. It's like trying to drive the car with one hand on the wheel and reaching one hand towards God. Eventually, one or the other is going to lead, and some of us have let fear drive way too long. Not because we wanted to, but because we thought it was protecting us. But fear doesn't just protect us. Fear limits us. Fear keeps people small. Fear keeps them guarded. Fear keeps people stuck in a survival mode. And maybe that's where you are today. You're not failing, you're just afraid. Afraid to trust again. Afraid to step forward again. Afraid to believe things could change again. But you know what? If Jesus were sitting across from you today, I do believe he would stay. He wouldn't just say, hey, stay where you are, play it safe, don't take a risk. No. I think he would say exactly what he said to the disciples that day. He would say, take courage, it's me, do not be afraid. So wherever you are today, if fear has been louder than faith in your life, just quietly say to yourself, I'm choosing courage today. Not because the fear is gone, but you're choosing whose voice you're going to follow. Don't give up. There's more in you. You're held. And now week 4, fear doesn't get the final word. So this week when fear starts talking again, when that anxiety starts spinning and the what ifs start piling up in your mind, remind yourself that that's not the voice of Jesus. And come back to the truth. The truth that says, I'll listen to his voice, not my fear. Now next week we're going to go even a little deeper, because sometimes it's not just fear we're holding on to. Sometimes it's pain. Sometimes it's hurt. Sometimes it's what someone did to us and we've carried it for years. Week 5, we're going to talk about you can let it go and you don't have to carry that anymore. Don't miss next week. Hope to see you then.